Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
It is really wonderful to be here. I feel right at home. We use me at Unity of New York, where I'm from. That was beautiful to hear about your Uncle Arthur. I'm touched, and these flowers are beautiful. And I'm personally always touched by shared silence. I started my life as a Quaker, and now I'm an interfaith minister, and having gone all over the map, I'm grounded in that. So thank you for sharing that silence. That was beautiful. I have a lot I want to say today, so I'm going to jump right in. Martin Luther King. This is the weekend where we celebrate his birth, and I believe that he is more relevant now, that we need his clarion call now more than ever. And I see this national holiday celebrating his birth as a chance to explore and meditate on his work and the concerns that he articulated. Now, every year, we always hear about the dream, which I love. And yet, I've noticed it tends to be the only thing we hear about year after year. And I'm concerned that there has been a sanitizing of the message, as if some people would say, well, he had the dream and now we've achieved it, and now we celebrate. Or others would say, what is your dream, your personal dream, your quest? But Dr. King had a dream that was collective, not personal. It always pointed toward the beloved community, never shied away from the radical spirituality necessary to get us there together. So today I want to go broader, drawing upon sermons and writings from throughout his career to relate his message to today and what's going on in general, and also bring it down to what I see as his message to each of us individually. I hope the talk will be practical and that it will affect how we all move in the world and go beyond rhetoric to a living, loving reality. Now, I picked my title today because Dr. King always called us to follow a higher law, the law of God, especially the teachings of Jesus. I've noticed many literalists will ignore the parts about peace, love your enemies, turn the other cheek, which are difficult to take literally. Well, King did so. He embraced the full peace message, and I love that. And he was up against laws that, by any measure, were immoral, treating one race as inherently inferior. He saw these as unjust laws out of alignment with God's law, the higher law. Now, he also seems to say, whatever your understanding of God's law is, try to go deeper. Go further. Imagine an even higher vision of the law that you can have in your life as your life. So the call to a higher law is also the call to a higher understanding of God's law. Now, as churches and spiritual centers, our job is not to get involved in the personalities of politics, but to shine light on our values, to ask questions that guide us to seek solutions, and I believe to create a spiritual infrastructure to facilitate the healing process. And I've noticed that we could really use some healing right now, collectively. The three issues that animated King's life were racism, war, and poverty, which are very much alive today. We confront serious issues, and yet we seem incapable of talking to each other as a society. Compromise and compassion are seen as weak. And so today, we have the longest shutdown in our government's history. We're literally non-functional. And to me, that is sad. Beneath any particular issue or opinion, I see a profound spiritual crisis, one that King saw in his own time, and which we have yet to address as a nation in any significant way. We live with the consequences of that. And if we look at our strategies today, we all seem to fight to get to our utopia. I'm going to scream and outmaneuver you, maybe trick or overpower, crush the enemy, and thereby arrive at a beautiful world full of peace and harmony. And if I'm honest, that's what we tend to do. Right? I'm going to get them. They'll get their comeuppance. Well, with King, the means had to match the ends. They say there is no way to peace. Peace is the way. But it's not passive. It's not weak, no. Inspired by Gandhi's philosophy of satyagraha, King called his work Nonviolent Resistance. And I think we can learn a lot from the underpinnings of that philosophy. King delineated 5 aspects of nonviolent resistance. Number 1, quote, "It is non-aggressive physically, but dynamically aggressive spiritually." 2, seeks to win over the other side, not defeat or humiliate them. 3, it's opposed to the forces of evil rather than the perpetrators of it. 4, quote, "It avoids not only external physical violence, but also internal violence of spirit." And 5, it's based on the conviction that the universe is on the side of justice. I think these are 5 beautiful principles that I would love to bring into life. If we look back at King's own time, those who sought to integrate the lunch counters did so peacefully and remained peaceful in the midst of violence against them. And they trained for this and were not allowed to participate if they could not remain peaceful physically and spiritually, which is amazing. King believed that unearned suffering was redemptive. You see, if both sides fight, it's just another story on the news. But when one side refuses to fight back, even refuses to yell or demonstrate any hatred, it wakes up the conscience of those they resist. In short, they lived in the reality of an integrated lunch counter and invited everyone into the new reality. And they stuck to that higher vision no matter what. And they prevailed. Now, how does this relate to us now? Well, some of the issues we face today are unique to now. Others contain echoes of the past. But I think it's the place from which our contemporary issues arise that are all too familiar. It's a disrespect of others, what King called the thingification of people, making humans into things. And look at our ability to insult and bully each other instantly, to flame someone, or create a mean-spirited or even false video that goes viral and transforms and spreads hatred, the virus of hatred. Thus, the need for loving our neighbors and enemies. And King was specific about what that meant. He knew that love your enemies was not something romantic or the normal kind of love. In a 1961 speech, he spoke of agape love. And this is significant and worth quoting at length. He said, quote, "Agape is understanding, creative, redemptive goodwill to all men. It is an overflowing love which seeks nothing in return. Theologians would say that it is the love of God operating in the human heart, so that when one rises to love on this level, he loves men not because he likes them, not because their ways appeal to him, but he loves every man because God loves him. And he rises to the point of loving the person who does an evil deed while hating the deed that the person does. I think this is what Jesus meant when he said, 'Love your enemies.' I'm very happy that he didn't say, 'Like your enemies,' because it is pretty difficult to like some people. Like is sentimental, and it is pretty difficult to like someone bombing your home. It is pretty difficult to like somebody threatening your children. It is difficult to like congressmen who spend all of their time trying to defeat civil rights. But Jesus said, 'Love them,' and love is greater than like. Love is understanding, redemptive, creative goodwill for all men. And it is this idea, it is this whole ethic of love, which is the idea standing at the basis of our movement." End quote. Now that's beautiful. And I, for one, feel the lack of that in our culture, and I'll even say in me. In his final speech to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in 1967, King said, "America must be born again. and there's a spiritual nature to that. Can we all rise to that challenge? And again, it goes beyond the specifics of our political differences, because our political crisis, again, derives from that the spiritual crisis. People long for meaning and long to belong to something bigger than themselves. If we don't provide it somehow, they will find it through destructive outlets, defining themselves by who and what they are against. And we're seeing the ramifications and manifestations of that from time to time now. But in all of this, as crazy bad as it can seem right now, there may be an opportunity to go back to basics. Not only to look at civics on the worldly realm, but to re-examine our values. People may be open to new and kinder ways to be once they burn out on the cruelty and cycle of mutual bullying. So I ask, can we be there? Can I be there, showing another way to be when that moment arrives, pregnant with the possibility of that new nation that King dreamt of? It won't happen all at once, but the kicks of new life, the sparks, may appear for us to notice and magnify. All we can do is birth a new reality here, in and as us, and be that in the world, always daring to push beyond our comfort zone. See, I've noticed we get comfortable in one of two extremes, what I sometimes call the news reality, where we're angry, and the church reality, where we're loving. Too often we're angry and avoid love, or loving and deny our anger. In that same talk to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in 1967, King said, "What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic." And he continued, "It is precisely this collision of immoral power with powerless morality which constitutes the major crisis of our times." Powerless morality. It's a haunting phrase to me. It challenges us to ask if we're bringing power, even action, into our moral realm, into our spiritual life. I go to Unity of New York. In New Thought in Unity, we have a phrase, there's only one power, God the good, active in everything. And I know that I have to be careful, because that can sound like I'm taking it for granted. It can lead to complacency in me if I abdicate my part in articulating and magnifying that reality in the experience of the planet. Trusting that it will all work out without me, simply saying God's got this, can seem like indifference to suffering if I say, well, we'll get there eventually. So I do my part and God does the rest, as we heard in today's prayer. I love that. In his letter from the Birmingham jail, King said, "We must come to see that human progress never rolls in on the wheels of inevitability." Beautifully put. Rather, he says, we must be co-workers with God. See, otherwise I think that we abdicate our part and enforce the notion of God outside of ourselves. Over and over, King calls out those who seem to favor the status quo, those, quote, more devoted to order than to justice, who prefer a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice. Absence of tension feels like peace, but it's really more like comfort. And so we have to push beyond our comfort zone, because comfort can be an anesthetizer, an avoidance of life itself. Compassion sometimes demands that we feel the pain a bit. We remember that peace is not the absence of conflict, but rather poise in its midst. So we don't want to give in to what King called the myth of time, that somehow time will work it all out. Time, he reminds us, is neutral. We use it for our own purposes, and it's up to us to participate in God's co-creation. So, how do we keep from suffering, from having the weighty world pull us under? Can we move beyond the false dichotomy of world or spirit? I believe that we must stay spiritually fit, which is what we do here. It's like a spiritual gym, right? We consume healthy thoughts. We exercise with prayer and meditation and coming here and reading, examining our lives and being honest, seeking to know and express God better each day. This transformation is a crucial underpinning of any new world. In Strength to Love, King says, only through an inner spiritual transformation do we gain the strength to fight vigorously the evils of the world in a humble and loving spirit. He says we must recognize that social change will not come overnight, yet work as though it is an imminent possibility. And then he uses a phrase I love. He says, this hour in history needs a dedicated circle of transformed nonconformists. The saving of our world from pending doom will come, not through the complacent adjustment of the conforming majority, but through the creative maladjustment of a nonconforming minority. So we get to be radicals. The creative maladjustment of a nonconforming minority. That can be us, way showers. Personally, I want to counteract cruelty wherever I see it, even when it seems justified or they started it. To paraphrase King, cruelty can't defeat cruelty, only kindness can. Part of every nonviolent protest that King led was self-purification. It always preceded direct action, so that the action flowed from a purity of heart, or at least one with that intention. So what intention do I bring into my actions, my thoughts, or even my avoidance? Can I bring awareness and compassion to that and bring my higher self into the world today? That's my challenge. We have to keep doing our spiritual work because just as laws must be enforced in the physical world, so too higher law must be made visible for people to know it in their lives and to benefit from it now. The principles we articulate here are too good to hide or keep quiet. Each of us will be led in how to do our work, and let's support each other in that. And if you want to know the potential benefit of one simple act, here's a small story from Episcopal Archbishop Desmond Tutu of South Africa. When asked what was one of the formative experiences of his life, Tutu replied, "One incident comes to mind immediately. When I was a young child, I saw a white man tip his hat to a black woman. Please understand that such a gesture was completely unheard of in my country. The white man was an Episcopal bishop, and the black woman was my mother." We can never know the ripple effect of one small act. In this case, a tip of the hat led to a Nobel Peace Prize laureate who says this was a pivotal moment in his life. Never underestimate the power of your positive example. In fact, let's assume that it leads to and even is part of world peace. So, these times we live in are full of opportunity. They call us to a higher law, and King asks us to remain loving and vigilant. He spoke of divine dissatisfaction, of having a tough mind and a tender heart. And there's a balance of energies there that I see throughout his writings. And today we walk a tightrope between experiencing our divinity and our dissatisfaction, between the tough mind and the tender heart, love and assertiveness, gratitude and broken-heartedness, God and human. We are both. And I think we do best when we walk that line with grace, like Dr. King. So when one of us falls off the tightrope, let's be quick to help them up, to offer a hand, an encouraging word, even if, perhaps especially if, they don't deserve it. Because our highest self knows better. and calls on us each to bring the beloved community into a full realization. Together, let's share the news that the kingdom of heaven is at hand, and through our actions, invite everyone in. I think this is a beautiful opportunity that we're doing it here as a community, and let's share this feeling, this experience of love in action, motivated by Dr. King. Thank you for this opportunity to speak today. God bless. Amen.